Hello, beautiful souls. Thank you so very much for dropping by this video. To anyone who's new to this channel is dedicated to helping people learn the difference between fake non-duality and actual non-duality and how to recover from the fake stuff, often called Neo-Advaita. So I had a very interesting experience recently. A Neo-Advaita teacher showed up at a spiritual group that was non-dual focused and started preaching, teaching, and it was a very interesting experience for me. It's the first time I've had live contact with a Neo-Advaita teacher in almost 4 years, which is a good thing, which is a sign of recovery, because Neo-Advaita really is very addictive. So it was a very disturbing experience on multiple levels. I'm still sort of recuperating from it. I think what I found most disturbing is, so myself and the facilitator of this meeting, we literally argued with this person for almost an hour and a half. And for an hour and a half, I watched this person spin manipulative word games, mind games. But here's the thing that just became so apparent to me, that on the surface appear enlightened and wise. On the surface. Underneath it, just like a convoluted mess of emotional manipulation, mental, emotional, spiritual manipulation that appears wise. I'll give you an example. So the facilitator said something that was critical of what this person said. And instead of responding, what that person said, what the Neo-Advaita teacher said, okay, well, let's come into presence. And let me imitate them as well. So let's come into presence and let's find the thing that we can all agree on. Now, on the surface, that sounds wise. There's some tension, there's some conflict, and this person is like, okay, let's connect to God. I mean, he would probably hate the word God. Neo-Advaita teachers can't stand the word God, but let's connect to God and let's find something we can agree on. The reason why it's so manipulative is it's a complete bypassing of and a complete disregard of what was said. So in essence, the facilitator said, hey, what you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is harmful. It's incorrect. And instead of responding, the person in essence invited us to meditate, which sounds wise and sounds beautiful, except that's what Neo-Advaita is. It's a complete cut off of everything other than the experience of presence. Now, again, that can sound wise on a certain level, but it's actually completely dysfunctional. And I watched this person being unwilling or unable to answer questions about themselves. For example, someone asked, the facilitator asked them, well, did you ever have a kind of awakening experience? And their response is, well, it depends what you mean by experience. And then myself and the facilitator sort of said what we meant by experience. They said, well, experiences come and go. So you can see I'm imitating this person. It's like a computer program. It genuinely is. But the thing is, and this is where Neo-Advaita is so tricky, is it appears to be wise. It appears to be enlightened, when all it is just complete spiritual bypass. And by spiritual bypass, I mean a dissociation from feelings, from the body. And it's an act. It truly is an act that if you don't catch it, you'll get caught up in the act. And there were a couple times, so I've been talking out against Neo-Advaita for almost 4 years now. And there's a couple times where I'm like, oh, what that person just said, that's wise. Or like I got caught in it. I'm an expert on Neo-Advaita, and this guy caught me a couple times. There were a couple times where he threw some complex manipulations out where I caught it. But there was for an hour and a half, there were 2 or 3 times where he even got me. And like, I'm very passionate about detecting and speaking out against this. So what I'm walking away from this experience, I'm still digesting it. But the thing I'm most struck by in the moment is how something can appear true and helpful and virtuous even, and it actually isn't. And the way to tell is it integrated? This person was completely not integrated. It was like talking to a robot, but it was like talking to a robot that seemed wise and seemed loving. So I'm going to continue to break down this experience. And see, the thing is anyone can learn the Neo-Advaita game, but that doesn't mean they're enlightened. And by the Neo-Advaita game, I mean just literally a bunch of word games, just like this person. We asked him, like, why are you here at this satsang? Love. Like, on the surface, that sounds cool. Like, wow, this person came here for love. Like, and then it gets you thinking, like, oh, they found love. Oh, they want to share love. Oh, their whole life is guided by love. But none of us felt the love from this person. There was an imitation of love. For example, there were many smiles, and I'm imitating them now, like many smiles, and this voice that's very, very sweet, and this voice that sounds so wise and so deep, like they're coming from a deep place, and they're in touch with some primal reality. It's very seductive. It's very seductive and very convincing. And if I hadn't spent the last 4 years deconstructing this thing, I would have genuinely thought, oh my God, this guy is enlightened. I'm going to go follow him. Like, the show was that good. It was really good. So that's what I'll share for today, is the appearance of enlightenment is meaningless without actually getting to know the person, without actually like just having he was unwilling and unable to have a conversation about anything other than these spiritual ideas. We're like, why'd you marry your wife? Like, Like, we asked personal questions and they were completely redirected or refused to be answered. Ramana Maharshi, on the other hand, would share all sorts of things about his experience, his awakening experience, what it's like to be a Yanai. He would also just have conversations with people about their work, their life, their family problems. Thank you so very much for joining in. Look forward, you or not. Hi to my live viewers. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to type them in. I'm finishing up, but I'm happy to take any comments or questions. So you can look forward to or dread me talking more about this situation, it's not a situation, but this experience I had. Because, for the last 4 years, I've been talking based on my memories, right? And I think what was so disturbing is this was the most emotionally manipulative Neo-Advaita teacher I've ever encountered. Most of the ones I've encountered, it's just kind of a straight word game. Like, you are the self, or, come back to, or just come back to self-inquiry. But this person had some tricks I haven't seen. And it was very convincing. So, wow, 3 live viewers. I'm gonna leave the stream on for a minute in case anyone has any comments or questions. I kind of feel done talking for now, but if anyone wants to share anything, please do. CCVTTC. Hey, you. Thanks for saying hello. Thanks for dropping by. And actually, it's interesting. It's interesting that you say hi. I don't want to break anonymity. So let me see. What do I want to say? So what I will say is, recently someone sent to me a letter they had received from a Neo-Advaita teacher, and it's amazing. I was thinking about talking about this anyway, and so it was non-stop defense. And that's what I've realized from both this interaction I had with a Neo-Advaita teacher and from this letter that a Neo-Advaita teacher sent to someone. Neo-Advaita is like a belief system that will then engage in non-stop defense of its belief system. Hey, Petra, thanks for saying hi. And so that's what I experienced with this person. I'll get to that in a moment, Petra. Great question. And I'll give an example. So in human terms, if let's say you say to me, hey, Arthur, you're being rude. And oh, wow, love all the comments. Keep them coming. I will respond to them. Like, hey, Arthur, you're being rude. And so how I respond to that is very telling. So if I say, no, I'm not, that's maybe argumentative. If I say, oh, wow, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be rude. Let's talk about it. That's maybe more connecting, right? And maybe and a little more skillful. Or if I said, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm so sorry. Again, that's connective. But if I say to the person, oh, well, that's just your stuff. You're just projecting onto me. Or if I say, who is it that's feeling upset right now? Or if I say, well, you're just feeling that way because you're caught in ego. It's very twisted. What I just did, how I just those last 3 responses, very twisted. Because so again, someone comes at me and says, "Hey, you're being rude." And then in those responses, what I'm doing is I'm taking like, hey, I'm the authority. I'm more wise than you. I'm enlightened, and I'm actually going to teach you about how you're wrong. It's very twisted and convoluted. Can you feel into that? Imagine that you're upset with me and that you say like, "Hey, I don't like what you're doing," or "Hey, what you just did feels bad." And then my response is something like, "Who is it that feels that way?" Or, "Oh, that feeling's just ego." Or, um, "Well, you're just projecting onto me." Or, let me think of another one. That's just unresolved feelings from the past that you have. It's so twisted. It's so twisted on so many levels. There's so many things about that that is disharmonious and ultimately manipulative. And that's what Neo-Advaita is. It plays sophisticated, manipulative word games. And I've never seen this particular teacher, I've never seen this level of emotional manipulation. Most of the Neo-Advaita teachers I've seen, they just kind of stick to Neo-Advaita teachings, like uh, who is it that wants to know, or da da da. But so that's just what I'm sitting with, is the levels of complexity. Um, and so that's how an abusive relationship works. And anyone who's been in an abusive relationship will tell you it's mentally and emotionally complex and crazy making, and very hard to untangle, and very easy to fall uh, under the influence of the abuser, because the abuser is literally pulling people's strings. Okay, great. Hi, Pat. Satya, great question. I'll get to that. Petra, I have not met Muji. Um, and I'm glad I haven't met Muji. Thanks for asking. What's the difference between Neo-Advaita and the direct path? That is a great question. Neo-Advaita claims that it's the direct path, and it really isn't. If it was the direct path, so right now there's, I don't know, 1,000 plus Neo-Advaita teachers. There's literally millions, tens of millions of Neo-Advaita students, people following these Neo-Advaita teachers. If Neo-Advaita was the direct path, the world would be having a mass awakening right now. Like, all these people would be liberated, but it's not. So Ramana Maharshi said the path of self-inquiry is the direct path. Now, that may seem to contradict what I just said, because most Neo-Advaita teachers teach the path of self-inquiry, but actually they don't. They teach the practice of self-inquiry, but the path of self-inquiry has rigorous preparations before practicing self-inquiry. That's why no one wakes up in Neo-Advaita satsangs. Well, there's two types of Neo-Advaita satsangs. There's the ones that push self-inquiry, and that's what I'm talking about now. But there's another type, which I'll get to in a moment. So that's why no one wakes up, because Ramana Maharshi said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said for the properly prepared mind, the path of self-inquiry is easy. For the not properly prepared mind, it's impossible. Which is why people go to satsang for years, to the self-inquiry focused satsang for years, and no one wakes up, because they're not properly prepared for self-inquiry. So if this is the non-dual path, the traditional non-dual path, self-inquiry is like, there we go. I'm trying to get my hands. So self-inquiry is just the very end. There's all this preparation beforehand. And so then the other type of Neo-Advaita is, I call it Neo-Advaita, where it's just a bunch of talking. Like, you are the self, there's nothing to do, you already are, there's no free will, everything's predetermined. Like, it's just talking. And in fact, don't practice self-inquiry because you're already enlightened. It's ridiculous. It's not non-duality at all. It's its own thing. And many teachers call that the direct path. Like, this is the direct path. Like, here, I'm going to imitate one. The direct path is to recognize that right here, right now, you are consciousness. You are observing your thoughts, your feelings, but you are not your feelings. See that and you will be free. Now, the place where it gets sticky is because if you listen to that and do that, you'll have a temporary experience. Like, if you just did what I said, like if I do what I just said, then I start to feel this spaciousness and this like presence and awareness. And I'm like, wow, this feels good. The problem is that approach will never lead. I can't say never, but really never, mostly never, 99.99% never lead to uh, actual realization or liberation. It just creates temporary experiences. And then the only way to have that experience is to go back to satsang, to read Neo-Advaita things, to talk Neo-Advaita things, to think Neo-Advaita things. It becomes an addiction. It becomes an addiction. So yeah. So thank you for your answer about Muji, but I feel that Eckhart Tolle is truthful. Do you think he is? In general, I don't like to comment on specific spiritual teachers. So let me see. So first of all, I love the question. So I'm not going to directly respond to that. And the reason why is it creates conflict. But what I will say, there are some things I like about Eckhart Tolle, and there are some things I find very disturbing. One of the things I like about Eckhart Tolle is he talks about purpose and having a sense of purpose. That, hardcore Neo-Advaita says there is no purpose. There is no meaning to life. So I appreciate that he talks about finding your purpose and being of service. And he talks about, in essence, bridging this, he does talk about presence and the now. In essence, bringing spiritual ideas onto this earth and living them. So I'm very grateful to him for doing that. Another thing I really appreciate about him is he gives one of the best answers I've ever heard to why does suffering happen? And he says it's a profound mystery. It's the age-old question, right? Why, if God is all good, why is life so hard? Why does suffering happen? And his answer is that it's an age-old mystery. It's not an age-old. It's a mystery, and something along the lines of the story of the prodigal son, which is a story from the Bible. And the essence of the prodigal son is there's this rich father who has two children. And one of the children says, hey, I want my half of the inheritance. And the father gives it to him. And then he goes off and he wastes his inheritance. Like he becomes, they don't say, but, he probably partied a lot and blew all his money. And then he came crawling back to his father. And when his father saw him approaching on the road, the father was like, oh my God, this is so wonderful. Like, let's have a feast, like bring out the best food. And he welcomed the son home. And the son who didn't blow their inheritance was like, hey, that's not fair. Like he blew his inheritance and I stayed loyal to the whole time. And the father's response is, and I have goosebumps and I'm paraphrasing here, is, and the son who didn't blow the inheritance said, well, why are we having a celebration? Like this guy blew his money, And the father said, yeah, in essence, like, yes, you've always been with me, and that's beautiful. But I had lost a son, and that son has now returned. And I'm on the verge of tears. It's a very beautiful story. It's not a logical story, but it goes right to the heart. For me, it does. And and I appreciate Eckhart Tolle saying that. I think it's one of the best answers I've ever heard. and that there's something very precious about reunion, about a loss and then a healing, a loss and a reunion. So those, and he's right. There's many other things I appreciate: coming into the now, being aware of your story, witnessing things. There's many things he teaches that I really appreciate. And he's partially, in my view, a Neo-Advaita teacher. Meaning he teaches people something like self-inquiry for people who are just not ready. Like, again, Ramana Maharshi said that for those who are not properly prepared, self-inquiry is impossible. So I haven't dived deeply into him, but he talks about things. He also does talk about things like there is no person, and which I just reject. I reject it on two levels. One level, I don't believe that's true. Another level is that's completely contradictory to what traditional Advaita teaches. And on a third level, even if there is some truth to it, it's not helpful. It actually creates confusion. And my main beef with Eckhart Tolle or any big spiritual teacher is the true spiritual path is a one-on-one thing. It's not church. For the right person, saying like something like you are consciousness could change their life. For most people, saying you are consciousness creates confusion, because until you're balanced and emotionally integrated, which, if I remember, I talked about the preparatory practices. Until you're a balanced and emotionally integrated person, focusing on I am consciousness is very harmful. And in fact, most people who came to Ramana Maharshi, he did not say things like that, and he didn't teach them self-inquiry. So those are a few of my thoughts on Eckhart Tolle, but they also really, I believe, apply to any of the big spiritual teachers. Is they have some deep wisdom to share, and I believe they all have some very deep distortions, and their method of teaching is harmful. A true spiritual teaching is not a church sermon. It's individual tutelage and mentorship. So on top of it all, it's commercial. True spirituality cannot be sold. And my view is, and this is also the classic Hindu view, is you don't charge money for spirit. If you're talking about liberation, you don't charge money. Because liberation is, in the Hindu and the Buddhist view, the cycle of birth, death, rebirth is like drowning in an ocean. And so a guru is someone who extends a helping hand to someone who's drowning. If someone's drowning, you don't say, hey, give me $10 and I'll help you out of the water. So anyone who charges money and is claiming or implying that what they're offering leads to enlightenment or liberation from suffering, I don't think they're liberated. I believe by doing that, they're actually proving that they're not liberated. That's my view. There are certain spirituals like energy healing and spiritual coaching or counseling. But when we get to ending the ego, when we come to the topic of liberation, I treat it as wholly beyond words. I think that's my main beef with big teachers, is that it's not treated wholly enough. Satya, which Western teacher would you call a true teacher of non-duality? My favorite is James Schwartz, who wrote The Essence of Enlightenment. I haven't talked to him yet, but looking at his website, I have a lot of respect for Tom Doss. And in fact, I'm working on a website that has answers to these questions. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Hold on one moment. And that's a great question, Satya. There is the Ramakrishna. So there's an organization called the Ramakrishna if you Google Ramakrishna Center, they have traditional swamis, all of whom are very, very well skilled in traditional Advaita Vedanta. So I'm going to post this here. Here's some resources. So that's just a rough draft of my website, but you'll see a couple links or the names to. Anton asked, "What do you think about Rupert Spira?" I've heard the name many, many times. I have a bad visceral feeling about him. I think maybe I've watched a video or two. So instead of talking to specific teachers in general, what I do is I talk about how to recognize a Neo-Advaita teacher. But I will say, so my impression of, so here's my question. I'm gonna, I get so torn. So basically, unless I have direct knowledge, like let's say someone just asked me about Eckhart Tolle. Like let's say I watched Eckhart Tolle hit somebody, which I haven't, and I don't think he's that kind of guy. Then I would tell you, like, hey, I saw blah blah. Like, not forget Eckhart Tolle. Let's say I saw a spiritual teacher like hit somebody. I would be like, hey, I saw that teacher. Da 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 da. If I don't have direct knowledge, I don't like to name names. But so the person who asked about Rupert Spira, here's my question for you. Does Rupert just talk and talk and talk like you are consciousness? There is no world. You don't exist. Just practice self-inquiry. There's nothing to do. Da, 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 da. Just witness your thoughts and feelings. Like, are there like 10 things that he talks about and that's all he talks about? And says that everything else is bad, wrong, or not helpful? If so, he's Neo-Advaita. And if you value your sanity, I would stay away from him. So that's my response to. Pat, may I ask a question on rebirthing breathwork? Yes, any question is welcome here. I learned rebirthing breathwork from Leonard Orr, the founder of rebirthing breathwork. So it's funny that you asked that. Maybe you found this channel because of that. I did a couple videos on Leonard Orr. Can people with autism understand the complexity, and are there possible dangers? So I can't advise on that. What I can say is a couple things is every form of medicine or healing practice has potential danger. Like too much vitamin C can be harmful. Like you can't take St. John's wort if you're on blood thinners. Like everything has contraindications. Is rebirthing? If I had interest in offering rebirthing breathwork to someone with autism, I would just do it for like a minute and see how they do. And then I would do it for 2 minutes and see how they do. Like I would just do it very gently. And I used to be a rebirther, and that would be my approach. That's how I would do. Anton, oh my God, I love it. It feels like a guy like Jesus never preached stuff like that the mind was evil and that people should become like empty shells. More about being a decent, loving human being. Thank you, Anton. I'm very touched by that because it speaks to my experience of like, there's a big difference between there's just such a big difference between what Neo-Advaita teaches, and not just actual non-duality, but just the wisdom traditions of the world. Like it really is its own thing, but it claims to represent all the wisdom traditions of the world, but it really isn't. It really is not. I'm going to answer more questions, but before I do, I want to put out my email address. I'm creating a mailing list because I'm going to start, like, this is just an impromptu chat, which I'm loving. And I'm going to start groups, support groups for people recovering from Neo-Advaita. And I'm starting to connect to other people. So if you'd like to be on my mailing list, please drop me an email. Also, if you subscribe to this channel, I'm gonna post links here, links and information. So I'll just announce it now. 2 weeks from now, I'm gonna host a group on Sunday the 22nd, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Sunday 22nd. Support group for people who've been recovering from fake non-duality, from Neo-Advaita. It's going to be, what do I want to say about? I'm going to say more. I'm going to make a video that shares more about it. But like I said, subscribe to this channel or send me an email, and that's happening in 2 weeks. And my end goal is to have daily groups, and it's going to take time to build up to that. Especially after this encounter I just had with this Neo-Advaita teacher. Neo-Advaita can really twist your sense of reality. And it can be, depending how deep you go, it can be hard to come out of and recover from. So back to questions. So yeah, so the mind is evil. I mean, come on. There's not a single person who teaches that who has ended their mind. It'd be like if I was like, eating food is evil. It's like if I ate a bunch of food and then, can you imagine, like, how twisted would that be? I'll tell you what, here you go. Here's a better example. How twisted would it be if I like went and had a lot of sex, and then I was leading a spiritual, like I had a very active sex life, and then I was leading a spiritual church that the message of the church was sex is evil and you should become celibate. Like, how twisted would that be? How inauthentic would I have to be? And here's the thing. When you're inauthentic, you can put on a show. And that's what these people are doing, saying the mind is evil. It's absurd. Talk about duality. Like, to say the mind is evil is to say the mind is not divine or not part of the divine. And yes, that's the other difference, is in Neo-Advaita, there's a complete disconnect between your actions. Like, it's all about having the right thoughts and being in the state of consciousness, but there's no integration of that consciousness. That's why I was saying I appreciate what Eckhart Tolle said about like living your values. Again, there are some things I don't like about Eckhart Tolle, but I appreciate that he's like talks about living spirituality, embodying it. Thank you for that, Anton. Rowan, the biggest difference I find between fakers and real spiritual teachers is their view on the deep sleep. Well said, Rowan. I mean, you can share more if you'd like. I'll riff off that for a moment, and then I've got a little more time. So in classical Indian thought, in Advaita Vedanta, it's, well, there's so much I could say there. Ask a Neo-Advaita teacher if they are awake during deep sleep, and watch the word games fly. Ramana Maharshi pointed out, as did other actual non-dual teachers, that that for someone who is actually awake, who's ended the ego, and ending the ego doesn't mean ending the mind or ending the person. That's a whole nother topic. That they're actually they're aware of themselves even in deep sleep. That there's not a single moment throughout the day in which they're not aware of the self, of consciousness, even in deep sleep. So that is, and that's another thing that Neo-Advaita teachers hate, is ask them if they're aware of awareness effortlessly all day long, much less during deep sleep, because that's what Ramana defined enlightenment is. And that's why I don't teach non-duality. I have a very, I think, deep understanding of the theoretical piece and even the path, but I haven't completed the path. According to Ramana Maharshi, the completion of the path is effortless. Like, so if you and I, if we do self-inquiry for a minute, like we're just like, okay, what is watching the thoughts? We'll have an experience, right? We'll have awareness of awareness, you could say. Awareness will become very aware to us. And then if we, as someone who's not liberated, and then if I stop making, and Ramana Maharshi called that samadhi with effort. You put in effort, you experience a temporary union, a temporary melting of the ego, and then you experience communion. And probably everyone here has felt that for at least 1 second, oftentimes in a Neo-Advaita satsang. But then as soon as I stop or someone stops, then in a very short time, the ego comes back and that awareness becomes covered over and not in the forefront. Ramana Maharshi said liberation is when that awareness is in the forefront, constantly, effortlessly. See, Neo-Advaita just is basically teaching people how to have samadhi with effort. But since the Neo-Advaita teachers have, and Ramana Maharshi called that effortless samadhi, he called it sahaj samadhi, or natural or effortless samadhi. Because none of the Neo-Advaita teachers have attained that, they're not able to teach it, and they're not able to lead anyone there. I met one person who I hesitate to call a Neo-Advaita teacher, who it sounds like from what he said, it sounded like he mostly had achieved that. He didn't suffer. He was aware of it all day long, even in his sleep. He still suffered a little bit, so I don't think it was 100%. But he didn't have the knowledge of the path. He didn't know how to teach people. He didn't understand the preparatory practices. So here's a guy who basically doesn't suffer. Maybe he suffers a little bit. He's in the experience effortlessly all day long, even during sleep, and he couldn't lead anyone to liberation. He could help people, and he did. And he helped me, and I'm grateful for his wisdom. But he didn't help me end suffering. Yeah, so that's a lot. I'm just so grateful for this participation. And so I'm starting to work on building community. I've been just focused on educating, which has been cool. But now I'm ready to create community around this where people can come together and share their experiences and support each other. And it'll be like today, I've mostly been teaching, not in the sense of teaching you are the self, but teaching about the process of recovery from Neo-Advaita. But the groups are going to be more people sharing how they were harmed and what they're doing to recover. It's going to be a more of a sharing group than a teaching group. And there will be teaching groups as well, but I'm excited to create some community. I'm excited, at our high today, we had 8 people here. I'm grateful that what I'm sharing is resonating with people and hopefully being a little helpful. Is the mind malleable towards perception of reality and liberation? So my view, and I think this is an alignment, is that pretty much every spiritual tradition is focused around working with the mind. The problem with Neo-Advaita is it only works with the mind, and it only works with the mind in a very narrow way. So is the mind malleable? I mean, my mind is malleable, and I don't think I'm alone in this. And, the spiritual path in general, I mean, that's kind of one of the fundamentals is yes, the mind can be changed. The problem is with Neo-Advaita is it's trying to change the mind in a way that will not change the mind. It has some impact, which I'm still trying to understand. So the whole essence of actual Advaita Vedanta is that the mind is so the self is like a sun, and the mind are like clouds that obscure the sun. And when the mind is purified properly, not the way we've been taught in Neo-Advaita satsangs, then the shining of the sun is apparent. So, and again, I haven't completed the journey, so I can only tell you where I am. Yeah, so I need to wrap up. If there's any last minute questions or comments, again, this has been very rich and helpful. Thank you so much to everyone who dropped by. And again, Pat wrote, "You okay?" Thank you, Pat. So I put up on my website that's just a rough draft that has some resources. And I put my email for anyone who wants to be on a mailing list. And just again, first formal event is going to be in 11 days. And you can get details by sending me an email, or you can check back here. I'm going to make an announcement. It's going to be a Zoom meeting, and it's going to be a participatory meeting where people get to share. So thank you so much, beautiful, beautiful souls. Wow. CCV TTC said, my old Neo-Advaita teacher used to say the enlightenment has nothing, suffering in the sense of negative emotions. Now, I would agree that enlightenment is not the end of pain, that pain is still going to happen, but that definition, that's a completely novel definition. That's the opposite of what actual non-duality teaches, what Buddhism teaches. I mean, that's just a made-up definition of enlightenment. For those who can't see, my CCV TTC said, my old Neo-Advaita teacher used to say that enlightenment has nothing to do with suffering, that after enlightenment, one can still experience suffering because it has nothing to do with each other. So, I mean, I could do a whole video on that, and I probably will. I mean, that's a very strong statement. The level of bullshit. And that's how, a Neo-Advaita teacher has to teach that because they're still suffering. And so it gives them justification to teach. But it's absurd. Now, that's not to say pain isn't going to happen. That you might not have, you might still have emotional pain, and you'll definitely have physical pain. And I don't want to make it like 100% of like, no, you'll never have suffering again. That's very absolutist. And also I haven't experienced it. So, but the definition of enlightenment in Buddhism is the end of suffering. I mean, straight up. And Advaita Vedanta, the definition of enlightenment is nonstop immersion in the self. And it's said that is the end of suffering. To say they have nothing to do with each other is absurd beyond words. I mean, in Advaita Vedanta, in actual non-duality, it's said that lack of awareness of self is the root cause of all suffering. Now, Ramana Maharshi did say that even for the one who knows the self, the ego will still arise. I assume he meant arise occasionally. He said, however, but the knower of the self doesn't get caught into it, doesn't get caught in it. So that statement, I mean, that's worthy of a whole video. That's just complete bullshit. Pat, can I speak more about rebirthing breath work? I mean, it's not something I do anymore. I mean, that was literally something I did. CCVTT. See, that's the, I mean, they just contradicted themselves, right? Like, if there is no person, then suffering's impossible. I mean, it's so twisted. Thank you for saying that, CCVTTC. I'm just going to call you CC. That's for shorter. So yeah, Pat, I haven't done rebirthing this century. Literally, I mean, offered it to other people. I've done some on myself, but I'm just trying to think if there's anyone. I mean, you're welcome to send me an email, and if I meet someone I trust who knows about rebirthing, I mean, I was very heavily involved in rebirthing. I was a direct student and a personal secretary to Leonard Orr. So, I mean, you can share a little more and maybe I'll respond personally, but it's not something I'm currently spending a lot of time on. Thank you, beautiful souls. I wish everyone a beautiful, beautiful day. Thank you for joining in, and more on the way. Take care. Big love.